Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is setting up the MacroCore system to take its first few images. And in this case, we're just going to do a standard panoramic photograph. So there's some things you want to do on your desktop computer before you get started. I generally keep an active 2D or an active 3D folder where I create a directory for my images to go. But in this case, since we're doing a video tutorial, what I've done is I've gone in, created a folder called Macropod MacroCore, and then MacroCore images and core scanning. And that's what I'm going to be using to store all of the individual photographs that I capture right here into this empty folder. So, now that that's set up, what we're going to do is turn over to our camera and get that set up. Okay, so now we're going to turn our attention to the MacroCore system. And since we want to have all of our images be centralized on the computer, what we want to do is just connect our computer to the camera given the USB cable that you have. So in this case, it's just a micro USB port that connects directly to a USB or USB-C on your computer. So that's on, and now our first step is to turn on the camera. And once that cable's connected, that's going to automatically open your driver software on your computer, and that's the Eos Utility. So what you want to do first and foremost is navigate to this folder in the upper right hand corner, and you want to select that folder that we just created on our desktop. So in this case, it's going to be under the video tutorials, the Macropod MacroCore, the MacroCore images, and core scanning demo. So we'll press OK, and now we want to open up a live view shoot. So the camera right now is in manual mode. What that means is that it's not automatically adjusting for the current lighting conditions. So what you want to do is just change the mode of your camera so that it's on the automatic mode. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to see everything that the camera is looking at just by automatically adjusting for any settings or conditions that are out. So let's go to that setting, C2, C1, B, manual, AV. Okay, so there's the automatic mode. And now the other thing we want to do is on the side of the lens, there's an automatic focus and a manual focus. Since we're pointing down to our sample, we just want to switch it to automatic and hold the focus halfway so that it just focuses on your sample. And then switch it back into manual. That way, it's consistently going to be focused on your sample. Now you can see we're just looking at the edge of this core sample. What we want to do is actually just move and position the camera so that we're looking at basically the entire length of the width. Yep, so right about there. And you can see how the lines aren't exactly parallel to the frame, the field of view of the camera. So what we're going to do is just rotate the camera a little bit clockwise. Like I told you, there's some wiggle room in that carbon fiber arm. So that will basically just sort of align the camera so that you have the core sample is a little bit more parallel. Okay. So now what we want to do is set up the controller to begin taking our images. Now we know how long this core sample is. One is we could just measure it. Two, we can actually kind of see with our eyes how much distance we're seeing. So that's going to basically help us figure out how many steps we want to capture. But a basic rule of thumb that I always have that's always going to give you enough data when you're doing macro imaging is just count the number of holes that are present on the slider unit itself. For every one gap from hole to hole, just enter 2 images. So this is about the length of 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. So let's take 8 pictures through the core sample, and what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that we have enough data to complete a full Photomerge or Panoramic in the end. So in order to do that, you'll basically go to steps here, you'll enter 8, and you'll hit your check mark. The next thing we want to do is, since we're only using the y-axis here, that's what we're going to do is just navigate to the start of this core sample. We're going to hit change, start, stop, and we're going to hit set to set our start position. And then we're going to move all the way through the core sample. Okay, right there. And that's going to be, we're now at the very end, so that's going to be our end position. We're going to hit set. Okay. So that's really all you need to do for the entire controller. The next thing you want to do is close your live view on the screen. And what we want to do is take the camera so that it's back on its manual mode. So manual is going to allow us to basically achieve the desired settings that we want. And generally when you're shooting macro, and in all cases with the 100mm and the MP65, we want to use an exposure of 1/200, an aperture of f4, and we want to use an ISO that's low, so between 100 and 1000, but if you can get it under 500, that's even better. So those settings we're going to start, look okay, and then what we're going to do is turn our flash on, and we're just going to make sure our flash is also in the manual mode, and it is, and in the manual mode we want to know where it's at. Right now it's at 1/16th power. So that means of the total power that can be emitted, total light that could be emitted from that flash, we're using 1/16th of that total light. So the first thing to do is fire a test shot to open up other functions in quick preview. And that opens up a standard window where we can just take an individual photograph and take a look at the result. And you can see there, we don't have too many focal limitations. We don't need to stack this image because there's enough distance between the camera and the sample where we can get a high quality photo without doing any focus stacking. Focus stacking isn't really required until we start getting into higher magnification, which I'll demonstrate in the following 2 videos. But now that this is set up and we know that the image is pretty good, we're going to go back to our folder and we just want to delete that test shot that we just took. So we're going to go back to our desktop, our video tutorials, Macropod MacroCore, and the MacroCore images, core scanning. There's our folder, which was automatically created. We're going to hit Shift Delete, delete it permanently, and now we're good to go. We can actually press Start. So we're going to come back to our camera, we're going to press Start, and now what it's going to do is automatically capture 8 photographs through this material. Actually, I shouldn't say 8 photographs. One thing that's important to remember is that this controller is the number of steps. So it's actually going to do photo, step, photo, step, photo, step. So because it's going to step 8 times, it's actually going to capture 9 individual photographs. So we're going to let that just finish. It's now at its 8th step, final photograph. Now it's going to move back to its starting position. And that's all you need to do in order to scan your first core. So just for the sake of moving on with the demonstration, we're going to now shift our attention over to the computer. We're going to turn off the camera just to conserve battery power, and we're going to turn off the stack shot to conserve battery power there as well. Turning off the camera is going to then close our Eos Utility, which is fine because we no longer need it. So we're going to draw our attention back over to the computer where we're going to stitch these images together. So to do that, we're going to open up Photoshop. So you should have a copy of Photoshop, and if not, you'll need to work with Macroscopic Solutions in order to get a licensed copy. But most institutions generally provide you with one, so this is not something that comes standard with our systems. But if you need it, we will absolutely get that for you. So what you can do now is go to File, and what we're going to do is go down here to Automate and Photomerge. Once you're at Photomerge, you're going to go to Reposition, and Reposition basically means that there's no alteration or distortion in the individual photographs to generate the panoramic. So it's going to be true to scale, and all of these images can be completely measurable with whatever analysis you need to perform. So let's go back to, to our desktop. Let's navigate to that folder. So it's going to be Video Tutorials. We're going to do the Macropod MacroCore, core scanning, and here's our folder, and here are our images, and exactly there are 9 of them. So we're going to hit OK. It's going to pull in all 9 images, and then we're going to hit Blend Images Together, press OK, and the rest of the work should be completely automated. So now Photoshop's going to go through, it's going to analyze distinctive features that it can copy and replicate, and it's going to merge the overlays over top of the panoramic. Now, because we're doing a panoramic, most people do understand that you need to capture some of the information on either side of the photograph so that there's enough information to overlap and apply. Now, in the following 2 videos, we're going to go through XYZ scanning, and we're actually going to use the field of view to actually speed up the entire capture process. So that field of view is going to be very, very important when understanding how much overlap we need. And in all cases, we're basically going to multiply our field of view by a factor of 0.8. That way there's always 20% overlap in both stitching and in both panoramic imaging. But we'll get there when that time comes. The other thing that you can do in order to sort of apply a very good scale bar is just take any type of measuring ruler, any geological ruler that you have that shows sediment or size grains and so on. And one of the things you can do is just place that on the edge of the drill core, just like so, and include it with your image. And that way you have a good sense of scale already in there. Well, we're just going to remove that for these demonstrations. Go back to our computer here, and now you can see the entire core sample is completely merged and stitched. And now we can go through and actually assess and evaluate the quality of this. And again, no focus stacking, and this is our level of quality. It's quite spectacular. So what we can do now is go down to the lower right-hand corner. These are all highlighted. What you want to do is merge the layers. That's going to turn them all into one file. And now you can start to actually edit your core sample. One thing that I always like to do is just go to levels and make everything a bit brighter and make everything dark just a little bit darker. That way it just increases your contrast. The other thing you could do is go to adjustments and curves, and you can edit here, again, the contrast. You could also do things like sharpen and so on, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So just to bring that back, what we can do then is save that overall file. So we're just going to save as, and we'll just save it to that original file in core scanning. And we can use it later as a reference just to describe basically some of the techniques we're going to be using as we do XY scanning. So we'll just save that. We're going to save it as a JPEG. No sense in saving it as a big TIFF or anything. It's not significant for anything else other than this demonstration. We'll just call it Panoramic, and save, and save. And that is basically a step-by-step process on how to capture a panoramic photograph of your core sample. So please stay tuned for the next XY scanning video, and then we'll talk about how to integrate focus stacking with this type of work as well. All right, thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned.